So, what if the ultimate blueprint for surviving the artificial intelligence takeover isn't found in like a Silicon Valley coding boot camp?
Right, which is usually where everyone looks.
Exactly. What if instead it's inside a remote mountain school in the southern Philippines?
It's a completely unexpected place to find the answer.
It really is. And, you might be listening to this right now, perhaps prepping for a corporate strategy meeting or just casually catching up on future
Or
trends.
maybe just commuting, yeah.
Right. And we hear this phrase, Industrial Revolution 5.0, just thrown around constantly, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's the buzzword of the decade,
Yeah, and people kind of assume preparing for it is all about raw processing power, like learning to code faster than a machine.
which is completely missing the point of where things are actually heading.
Exactly. So let's actually define that shift for a second, because Industrial Revolution 5.0 is the era where AI and automation completely take over those raw cognitive tasks.
The heavy lifting of data, the pure analysis machines are just going to handle all of that.
Yeah, they do it better and faster. So what remains for us humans is everything the machines cannot do. We're talking empathy, complex collaboration, and really human-centric problem solving.
The soft skills, basically. Though soft makes them sound less important than they are.
Totally. They are the essential skills. So today's deep dive takes us somewhere completely unexpected to find the key to that future.
I'm really excited about this one.
Me too. We are exploring a truly fascinating presentation by researchers Arciesa, Lorio, Lanilo, and Toledo from Sultan Kudarat State University.
And what's wild is they didn't study tech CEOs to figure out future survival.
Nope, not at all. They studied indigenous learners in the rural southern Philippines to investigate emotional intelligence, or EIQ, as the ultimate determinant of lifelong success.
And that contrast is, that's what makes our mission today so compelling. We're looking to decode the numerical relationship between raw cognitive capacity and emotional well-being using this highly specific case study. Through their research, we are going to unpack why traditional educational models, the ones most of us grew up with, might be failing to measure what actually matters most.
Because they really are. They need a massive recalibration, and this data shows us exactly why.
It really lays it all out.
So let's start by looking at the reality on the ground for these learners. The researchers identify this crisis, and they call it a dual deficit.
A dual deficit, right?
Yeah. And just for context, we are focusing on two ethno-linguistic groups in Esperanza, Sultan Kudarat, that's the Tetere, who make up about 82% of the learners in this study,
Okay.
and the Manobo Dulangan, making up the remaining 18%.
So this dual deficit is a critical starting point to understand the whole study. The first part of the deficit is a stagnation in cognitive skills.
Like the traditional IQ metric?
Exactly, the classic IQ. This was already a challenge in these remote areas, but it's been severely exacerbated by post-pandemic learning losses.
Yeah, we've seen that everywhere, but especially in rural communities.
Right. But the second part of the deficit is an absolute void of data regarding their emotional stability, their EQ.
So they have falling IQs and literally no idea what's happening with their EQs.
Spot on. The educational interventions taking place in these mountains are largely generic. They check the boxes for basic academics, but they completely fail to foster the actual human-centric soft skills required for the future.
Okay, let's unpack this framework the researchers use to tackle this because it's by Dulowitz and Higgs. And I want to throw out the old, tired cliche of comparing human intelligence to, like, computer hardware and software.
Yeah, please. We hear that all the time.
Right. It's so overused. Instead, I want you to think of intelligence like a high-performance off-road vehicle.
Oh, I like this.
So your intelligence quotient, your IQ, is the engine. It is the raw horsepower, the torque, your capacity for analysis, judgment, and basic logic.
The pure power generation of the vehicle,
Yeah.
basically.
Exactly that. But having a massive, 800 horsepower engine means absolutely nothing if you try to drive up a rocky mountain with a broken suspension system.
You're just going to spin out or crash.
We're going to tear the car apart. So your emotional quotient, your EQ, is the suspension, the steering, and the traction control.
It's the system that actually allows all that raw power to interact with the chaotic, bumpy real world.
Yes, without tearing the vehicle apart. So emotional intelligence, EIU, isn't just picking between the engine or the suspension.
Right. It's the synergy of both systems working together perfectly to actually get you to your destination.
Exactly. If you don't have both, you're not going anywhere.
I really like that visualization, actually, because it perfectly illustrates what the researchers did next. They didn't just take Western theoretical frameworks and blindly apply them.
Like Daniel Goleman's theory, right?
Yeah, Goleman's emotional intelligence theory, which breaks down into uh, self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, motivation, and social skills.
Which is a very Western corporate model.
Exactly. You can't just carelessly apply that to an indigenous population.
Yeah.
So they contextualized Goleman's domains within the Philippine indigenous peoples' education curriculum framework.
We should define that IPED framework real quick, because it isn't just a standard public school curriculum translated into a local dialect, is it?
No, not at all. The IPED framework is actually a mandate derived from the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act of 1997.
Oh, wow. So it's deeply rooted in law.
Yes. It dictates that for Indigenous learners, educational success simply cannot be separated from their Indigenous knowledge systems, their daily practices, and their cultural integrity.
Meaning you cannot strip away their culture just to teach them math.
Exactly. You have to teach the math through the culture. So by merging the Western EIQ metrics with this IPE framework, the researchers created a culturally responsive lens.
That's brilliant.
It evaluates their readiness for the human-centric demands of Industrial Revolution 5.0 while completely respecting and integrating their heritage.
Okay, so since we've established the whole vehicle analogy, let's open the hood and look at the engine.
Let's do it.
Let's look at the cognitive baseline testing for these students.
So the researchers categorize the participants into two developmental cohorts. You have the young learners, ages 9 to 11,
Okay.
and then the young adult learners, ages 11 to 15. And to assess their cognitive capacity fairly, they utilized nonverbal IQ tests.
I want to pause there for a second because I imagine someone listening might ask, why didn't they just use standard written tests?
It's a great question. But a written test in a rural indigenous setting often measures the completely wrong thing.
Because of the language differences.
Exactly.
Hmm.
If you test a student using a standardized exam in a language that isn't their mother tongue, you aren't measuring their intelligence or their pattern recognition.
You're just measuring a language barrier.
You're measuring how well they speak a foreign language, essentially. A nonverbal IQ test circumvents this entirely. It assesses cognitive capacity through spatial reasoning, visual pattern recognition, and logical deduction.
Without relying on language proficiency at all. It levels the playing field.
Precisely. It gives a true read of the raw horsepower.
That makes perfect sense. So what did the nonverbal data actually reveal?
Well, the results were sobering, honestly. For the younger learners, the 9 to 11 cohort, the mean score was 1.14.
And what does that translate to?
The researchers classify this as very low average.
Ouch. Okay.
Yeah. And when we look at the older cohort, the young adults aged 11 to 15, their mean score is 1.74, which is classified as below average.
Wait. Let me run that math. From age 9 to age 15, you have 6 full years of aging.
Right.
That is 6 years of critical brain development, 6 years of sitting in a classroom. And the developmental gain between those two age groups is only 0.60.
Just a 0.60 gain, yes.
Is this a failure of the test itself, or are these students just inherently hitting a cognitive wall?
The researchers' analysis points to neither, actually. This minimal 0.60 developmental gain over several crucial formative years highlights a profound systemic stagnation.
Systemic, meaning their environment.
Think about the environment. These communities are located in highly remote mountain areas of Sultan Kudarat. For these students, the IPED schools are often the only accessible educational institutions.
And I'm assuming they're severely under-resourced.
Severely. The environment simply lacks the infrastructure, the advanced educational stimuli, and the resources to effectively upgrade that engine.
So the raw horsepower isn't increasing because they just aren't being given the fuel or the mechanical upgrades to grow it.
Exactly. And that presents a massive danger for policymakers. If a government official or educational director only looks at those IQ scores, they see a 0.60 gain over 6 years.
They might just completely write these students off.
They might conclude that investing further is a waste of resources. They'll look at the data and say, well, they are improving. Why spend the money?
Which is a deeply, deeply flawed way to measure future potential.
It's missing the entire other half of the picture.
Right. If the cognitive engine is stalling due to systemic issues, we are forced to look at the other half of the vehicle. What is happening to their emotional suspension system?
Are they developing the human-centric skills that AI can't replace? That's the real question.
Here is where it gets really interesting, because the researchers administered a modified emotional quotient inventory adapted specifically for these indigenous learners.
And the data revealed some highly resilient social traits.
Yeah, let's look at self-management. This involves keeping a positive attitude during challenges, waiting patiently, and managing reactions in difficult, resource-scarce situations.
Important skills for anyone, anywhere.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And the students scored at the 55th percentile.
Which is surprisingly strong.
Right. More than half the general population would score lower on self-management than these students living in remote mountains.
It's a huge testament to their resilience. Their relationship skills were also notable, sitting at the 42nd percentile.
And that covers things like listening attentively, functioning well in groups, and communicating respectfully, right?
Yes. Very strong communal traits.
So it paints a picture of a very cohesive, socially functioning group of kids. They get along, they manage their outward behavior, and they clearly handle hardship well.
On the surface, it looks like a massive win.
But I know there is a massive drop-off coming in this data. What happened when the researchers looked at the absolute core of emotional intelligence?
They looked at self-awareness, which is the ability to recognize and understand your own moods, emotions, and personal drives.
And what were the numbers?
They absolutely plummeted. The self-awareness among the young learners sat at a staggering 7%.
Wait, 7%.
Heaven.
That isn't just a low score. That means 93% of their self-awareness competency is entirely undeveloped.
Exactly. When presented with statements like, I am comfortable talking about my emotions, or I know many words to describe my feelings, the students simply could not relate.
The vocabulary just wasn't there.
The vocabulary and the internal recognition just weren't there at all.
I have to challenge this because it feels contradictory. How can a group of students be in the 55th percentile for managing their behavior and the 42nd percentile for relationship skills, but have a 7% score in understanding their own emotions?
It seems like a paradox.
Yeah. How do you manage an emotion you can't even identify?
And that right there is the crucial insight of this entire study. It all comes down to understanding the mechanism of communal living.
Okay, break that down for us.
In many indigenous cultures, and honestly in highly remote communal settings in general, collective harmony often supersedes individual expression.
So the group is more important than the individual.
Always. You learn very early on to stay quiet, to wait your turn, and to not rock the boat.
Yeah.
Because the literal survival of the troop depends on cooperation.
Oh, wow. So what looks like high-level self-management on a standardized test is actually just external compliance.
Exactly. It is a survival mechanism. They are managing their outward reactions to keep the peace, but they never develop the internal vocabulary to say, I am feeling anxious about this test, or I am feeling frustrated by this situation.
They just swallow it.
Yes. And based on Daniel Goleman's theory, self-awareness is the absolute bedrock of emotional intelligence.
Right. If you lack that foundation, your impressive relationship skills are built on incredibly fragile ground.
Because true self-regulation means feeling the anger, identifying it, and choosing a productive response.
But what they are doing is just burying the feeling entirely to conform to the group. That is a staggering distinction.
It completely changes how you view those initial high scores.
So what does this all mean as they grow up? What happens when this fragile emotional foundation ages? Like when a 9-year-old with 7% self-awareness becomes a 15-year-old facing all the complexities of young adulthood.
Well, the researchers used linear regression to map out this exact trajectory. They calculated the R-squared values to determine the relationship between their combined IQ and EQ scores and their overall emotional stability over time.
Okay, let's translate R-squared for a second to visualize what that actually means because it can sound a bit academic.
Please do.
I like to think of R-squared like watching a massive flock of birds flying in the sky. If the R-squared value is high, those birds are flying in a super tight, synchronized formation.
You can predict exactly where the whole group is heading because the data points are tightly clustered around a trend.
Exactly. But if the R-squared value is low, the birds are scattering in every direction. It's chaos. You can't predict their trajectory at all because the connection between the variables is incredibly weak.
That is a perfect visualization.
Yeah.
So let's look at the flock of birds for the younger kids, the 9 to 11-year-olds.
Okay, what's our number?
The data showed an R-squared value of 0.09. Now, when you look at the graphical presentation in the study, the trend lines for these younger learners are still sloping upwards.
So they are still flying somewhat together. There's still an upward trajectory in their ability to absorb education and maintain emotional stability.
Yes, The window for intervention is wide open for them. They are highly moldable.
That's the good news.
But then we look at the older cohort, the young adults aged 11 to 15, the R-squared value plummets to 0.04.
Oh, man. The flock of birds completely scatters.
Completely scatters. The graphical slopes just flatline. The researchers identified this deeply concerning trend and gave it a very specific name.
What did they call it?
They call it emotional passivism.
Emotional passivism. Wow, that phrase carries a lot of weight. Walk us through the mechanics of how a student actually becomes emotionally passive.
It happens because the lack of self-awareness finally catches up with them. As these learners transition from children into young adults, life just inherently becomes more complex.
Right, the academic demands increase, social dynamics shift, puberty hits.
All of that. But remember, they still lack that 93% of their emotional vocabulary. Because they cannot articulate their internal struggles or advocate for their own needs, they simply check out.
They stop trying to process the friction and just detach completely.
They become passive participants in their own lives and education. They stop engaging dynamically with their environment. They stop asking questions, and they just kind of let things happen to them.
So the hardware, the .60 upgraded IQ engine, is technically running.
Yes, the engine is idling.
And they have just enough relationship compliance to not cause trouble in the classroom.
But the core operating system of personal agency is stalled.
This highlights the absolute necessity of early intervention. This raises an important question about how we teach. You cannot wait until high school to start teaching self-awareness.
The researchers stress this point heavily. Continuing to just teach standard academic subjects, trying to force a larger engine upgrade while completely ignoring the broken suspension, is a failing strategy.
It's not going to work.
There is an urgent need to recalibrate teaching and learning methodologies in these IPD schools. The curriculum must be specifically designed to revitalize self-awareness before these learners hit their teenage years.
Because if you wait until they are 15, the emotional passivism has already set in.
And reversing a flatline trajectory is incredibly difficult at that point.
And this brings the entire deep dive back to you, the listener. Because you might be wondering, why should you care about a highly localized study of Tetere and Manobo-Delongan learners in the remote mountains of Sultan Kudarat?
It might seem far removed from your daily life.
Exactly. Why does this matter if you are sitting in a high-rise boardroom or managing a team from a home office halfway across the globe?
But it matters deeply.
Because this study fundamentally proves that emotional intelligence is not just some soft corporate buzzword you throw on a resume to sound collaborative.
No, it is a measurable, vital, foundational survival skill.
It is the ultimate indicator of future foresight. Think back to our definition of Industrial Revolution 5.0 from the start of the show.
All right, artificial intelligence is soon going to possess an operational IQ that completely dwarfs human capacity.
It will be an engine with 10,000 horsepower. If you are trying to compete purely on cognitive processing like chasing that next .60 bump in your technical skills, you are playing a losing game.
You can't outprocess the machine.
Never. The future belongs to the human-centric soft skills, empathy, social awareness, responsible decision-making, and above all, self-awareness.
Whether you are navigating a remote mountain school with limited resources or trying to lead a global team through an unprecedented economic shift, the metric for success is identical.
It really is. The researchers propose that the union of these two values, the cognitive engine and the emotional suspension, must be set into a new gauge of measurement for all institutions.
It completely changes how we view not just global education, but our own daily professional development.
Which leaves us with a necessary final thought to ponder. This study utilized hard data to prove that without early intervention, a lack of self-awareness inevitably leads to emotional passivism as we age.
We just flatten out, scatter like the birds, and let life happen to us.
Exactly. Indigenous psychology and this targeted data both point to EIQ as the truest measure of whether a human being will thrive.
It's the ultimate determinant.
So it begs the question, how much of your own educational or professional background focused entirely on building your engine while completely ignoring the undeveloped 93% of your own emotional self-awareness?
It's a tough question to ask yourself.
Are you driving your career with high intelligence, checking all the boxes of self-management and corporate compliance, but secretly experiencing emotional passivism?
Just letting the current pull you along.
Exactly. Just something to think about before your next meeting.